Welcome back to the Painted Topher. Today we are tackling the shadow division of the Word of Blake, the evil of evils from the inner sphere. Now, I started painting these guys not because I knew much about the lore, but because I love the paint scheme. When I first started painting them, I started with this bit of a darker gray on top. As you see of some of my models here from the Highlander in particular, I went from the black to a little bit of a darker gray. But then recently, I've been inspired by seeing some artwork online, and I'm starting to adjust the colors of these to go a little bit higher up in the brighter colors on the top. So today we are going to be painting this Akuma. So let's get at it and paint the Word of Blake. So this fade starts with a black, and then it works with 3 shades of gray, from a little bit of a darker to lighter to another tone at the end. And I have to start with a black based model here in order to build up. So I'm going to keep the black on the legs. I'm going to start working with this little bit of a darker gray to start off. I think this is, I keep saying Stonewall gray, London gray, I think that's the name of it. And I'm going to start putting it on with the makeup sponge and making sure that the makeup sponge is damp before you start using it. And I'm not too worried about how much paint's on it because I'm trying to cover a lot of the model right now. Something you'll notice when you're trying to paint with a sponge, you cannot get underneath arms in different parts of the model. So I'm trying to take a little cut off piece of a sponge with that same paint and just trying to cover up some of those areas that were missed. So this is helpful because when you're doing the sponge technique with models, you're always going to miss underneath. So try it out if you're missing underneath the arms. Now I'm going to go back to the black in order to get the transition right from the gray to the black. And I'm taking off a lot of this black because I'm just trying to build it up and fade it into the gray. This will help, and later on I'll go back into it. Now I have to apologize. I lost my shot. This was a medium gray mixed with that London gray, and I went over, I left a little bit of the darker gray underneath, and I just did about 20% leading upwards as I tried to put a swiggly line where I was going. I apologize. Now I'm mixing the brighter gray with the medium gray for the next tone. And as you see, if you look a little bit, you can see where I did that previous layer. Now I'm looking at kind of from the top of the model so I can make sure I get those lighter grays higher and higher and higher, because that's kind of like how the source image is showing. The lighter grays going up, up, up. Now for the next blend, I'm adding more of the Stonewall gray with the medium gray and just trying to build up higher and higher, higher with the light tones. And this is a process. What I've noticed when doing this paint scheme, the more you put down of the grays, the brighter it's gonna get, but then it kind of ends up looking a little bit darker moving forward. So it's a process getting higher and higher, and just trust the process with the sponge technique. Now moving in with just the Stonewall gray, and I'm really hoping to get a brighter tone on top. And I'm kind of doing this on, especially with this Akuma model, from like the chest up, I'm hitting this, and the arms. I don't want to go lower because I don't want to ruin the gradient I just worked on with the 4 other layers. Well, that was a 3. It was 4 or 3 going up to this level. Now I'm adding a little bit of off-white to that Stonewall gray to try to hit just the tops of the shoulders, and I really want to kind of accentuate the light effect as you see in some of the source images of the shadow division. So really just trying to do that object source lighting here on the top and making sure I can sell that kind of gray to white. And I'll be honest, I chose to paint these guys because I thought that transition from the black to gray was really cool. And it was between this and a group called the Chinese Bandits, which are really cool too. Or like they're like a green with gold. And it ultimately was my wife that chose this group for me. So I need to learn more about the lore because they're really cool. So this is what it looks like right now. I will come back later in the video and hit white on the highest point of this. But moving forward, let's jump into the green. Now the 47th Shadow Division use green, so you could swap out whatever Shadow Division you're painting. This is the green one that I'm painting. I think it's good to say here that this green was done in 2 layers. So anytime painting details like this, it's wise to do it in 2 layers rather than blopping on one thick layer. And as you can see in that image right there in front, that shoulder, you can see gray coming through because I know I'm going to hit it with the second layer coming up. Next, I'm going to use retributor armor for the gold, and actually not. I'm so over Citadel. I'm going to use old gold now from Vallejo. Now come on, I'm over Citadel drying out. I know there's ways of stopping it, but I'm over it. This is my last bottle of gold from Citadel. But with this old gold from model color just hitting a little bit of the parts of the barrel, this was the discussion I had with someone last week. I believe when I look at art sources, most of the barrels aren't painted metallic. It's something I want to start doing more and more and more as I paint BattleTech miniatures. And I have no hopes for this lead belcher lasting longer, but I'm using the lead belcher to pick out the metal details. This is those antennas and small little areas on the model. Now I'm going to use P3 coal black, which is also model color dark sea blue, and I'm going to be working on the blacks, and I'm just want to use that coal black and start building up some of that highlights there just on the black area. And I'm going to, after I do this sponge technique, I'm going to start mixing in Thunderhawk blue to the mix, so I can start building up just slightly on this black area without overdoing it. And finally, after mixing the Thunderhawk blue, I'm just going to go straight with the Thunderhawk blue here, just to pick up the tiniest of details on those armor panels. Next, I'm going to start working on the edge highlighting on the black. I'm mixing coal black with the Thunderhawk blue for my first edge highlight, and just picking out decent amount of those lines. And this model has a lot of line details, so I'm realizing that there's a lot of edge highlights coming my way. Next, I'm going with just the Thunderhawk blue and hitting the edges of the armor panels. In this, I'm doing that kind of typical lighter highlight, that, what is it called? Heaviest, I can't ever say that. The heaviest of metal, whatever the style is, where I'm going thicker highlight to the brighter highlight on the edges. Now I'm mixing a little bit of gray with that Thunderhawk blue and just doing like dots on the corners of the panels. I had a friend that taught me this technique, and I'm trying to let it shine once again. And to wash now, I'm washing the blacks with a Nolan oil wash. And what the cool thing is, I'm using the Nolan oil wash to mix the transition between the black in that gray color. And I'm watering it down a bit, and to get that transition, I'm pulling the black from the gray and going downwards towards the black. I don't know if this is the best method, but I've been doing this since I've been painting my Shadow Division group, and I think it looks okay. If you have another method, let me know. But I did do the transition early on, but I'm just kind of pushing it more. Next, I'm going to use Recklin Flesh Shade and wash all of these gold areas on the Akuma. And at this point, I want to brighten up the gray more, so I'm going with all off-white and hitting the very top of the armor, the head, the ends of the hands, the missile pod on top. Everything I can do is just try to bring out more contrast on the very tops of the model. And now we start edge highlighting, and I mix the Stonewall Gray with off-white for my first highlight on this Akuma. And there are a lot of panels to edge highlight here, so if you paint this exact model, enjoy these edge highlights. But if you're painting another kind of CGL model, you might not have as many edge highlights to do here, but this was a process. And something to be mindful of when doing edge highlights, don't be afraid to flip the model upside down when painting these things, and don't always try taking that angle from the model going up to down, because sometimes it's easy to get those edge highlights when you flip it upside down, if that even makes sense, but it helps me. Next, I'm going straight with the off-white and not trying to go over the previous work I did with the other highlights, but just hitting some of those top points where the armor would hit the light. And I'm being careful with this because I have messed up highlights, and I've mentioned this before in the other videos that you can build up so much work with your armor and then mess it up with one flop. And I like to do these little scratches on the armor plates just because it kind of adds a little bit kind of a contrast to the model, a little bit of battle damage, but just kind of fun to add that little variation when you're painting. Now, doing edge highlights on this kind of model is very challenging because they're very small. There's not a lot of space to work with. So to do this, I have to take a lot of paint off my brush and being patient with the highlight and letting the brush do the work, if that makes sense, but being very patient and using the side of the brush for this edge highlights. Next, to highlight the greens, I'm mixing cold ice yellow with that errata green from scale 75, and doing again, being careful with these edges because this model has an obscene amount of edge highlights, more than my other painting videos I've done. So just picking them out and being careful. And this part was actually part tricky. I was quite nervous I was gonna mess up, and again, just being patient and slow with it, and it worked out in the end. And for the final highlight on the greens, I'm trying to push the contrast just a little bit by going with only the ice yellow on the very ends of the green, just to make them pop a little bit. I'm using emerald green to pick out the missiles on the chest and the arm. And thank you for those who are in the Discord chats. I had no idea what these things were, and it was thankfully from those who showed me the way to know what they were. And the next highlight is using mint twister just on the tops of these. I don't know if other people paint their missiles this color. I just thought this kind of emerald green would be a cool contrast. Now, these lenses are terribly small, so it's going to take patience. I'm using dark forest green from scale 75 and just being very careful. And in this case, it's okay if my lens color hits the sides because I'm going to be doing a glow. I mixed 50-50 of the errata green and the dark forest green and doing just the bottoms of the lenses, then moving to straight errata green and hitting even farther down at the bottom, and finally using ice yellow in the end to hit the final point of the highlight. And to do the glow, I'm using Green Stuff World fluorescent green, and I'm using this a little bit as a glaze over the ice yellow, and then I'm using it as a glaze on the ends of the lenses to show glow. Using oily steel from Model Color to highlight the golds and the various metal colors on the model. Next, I'm going to do chipping with black and using the sponge on the grays, and this can be done by getting a lot of the paint off the sponge and just chipping it very carefully. And on the blacks, I'm going to use iron hand steel and do the same chipping method down here to show scratches and scuffs all around the model. Now, I love the logos from the Shadow Division, and it's like a reversed triangle. So I'm using dark red from Model Color and blocking in that upside down triangle, whatever it is. And after I fill in the dark red, I come in to highlight it with a dark vermilion from Model Color. And what's interesting, for the 47th Shadow Division, they have green eyes, so I'm using errata green to build up those green eyes. Then they have a sword going down the middle. I'm not painting that sword, that is too small, but I'll go with the green eyes, so just errata green, and then going with black from Model Color and just doing those little dots for the eyes. And maybe later I'll try the sword, but not today. And just to add a little bit of contrast, I'm adding a little bit of that vermilion red and highlighting some of the edges and just trying to make it push the contrast a bit. It's for the Akuma, and I keep saying Akuma Matata. I don't know why, but I really like this guy. He turned out great, and I look forward to updating the rest of my Shadow Division with this quality. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. Have a great week, and thank you so much for tuning in to the Painted Topher. Have a great day.